Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly on Thursday the 14th of August 2025. I'm your host Barry Gallagher and we've got an action-packed podcast tonight. And joining me as always is Stuart Duggan. Stuart, how the hell are you?
I'm good, very hot. It's been a hot day.
Modest.
Modest, yeah. It's easy for me to say. Yeah, good. It's nice. Been nice having the nice weather. A nice distraction from perhaps some frustrating conversation about Celtic, but I look forward to chatting it through with you all.
Yes, and we're also joined by Scott Fleming. Scott, how's things down there?
Aye, not bad. I had a bit of a sort of nightmare getting home from work on a train today. For some reason, there's loads of delays and cancellations, so the listeners don't know how near they were not having to listen to my pish. But I made it home about 20 minutes ago.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah.
So you're coming in fresh with no preconception of the shit show that is Celtic.
Well, yeah, I have been frantically, as we, without wanting to spoiler it, obviously there is a lot of rumours flying about Twitter as we speak, so yep. I have been frantically seeing what I can find out about that, but it's all pretty vague at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing, kind of giving the listeners a look behind the curtain, but tend to sort of prepare this a few hours before we record the rundown, and as Scott says, there seems to be a flurry. Well, if you can call it a flurry, it seems like a flurry because we've had so little to look forward to all summer, but
it's a veritable avalanche compared to what's been coming down the pipe.
Yes, a blizzard. We're drowning in transfer rumours now, but we'll pick through them as well. Just a sort of, for a bit of fun, and Stuart, I'll come to you first. Our opening question is, if you could change one thing, now only one, I know that you've got many things you would like to change, but if you could change one thing about Celtic, what would it be and why?
Well, I don't know that I've taken a particularly fun answer, to be honest. If it was intended as a fun question, maybe I've taken it the wrong way. That I think essentially the club needs quite wholesale change, and I think that so much of Celtic are obviously very successful from a footballing capacity. Have been. We're living in a real golden era of success on the pitch, whether that's down to things just being great or lack of competition or whatever. It's been a wonderful sort of 10 plus years, 15 years of being a Celtic fan. But I think that for a club of our size, we just don't function particularly well at all. And if anything, our success on the pitch masks a lot of the deficiencies that we have. And it's very hard to argue for wholesale change at the club when you are objectively as successful as you have been. But if I had one thing, I would probably make a change at boardroom level, in the same sense that if you had a failing football team, generally the first person that gets the bullet and takes the blame is the manager. And if you are only granting me one thing, it would probably be the top job. Obviously, you're not going to unseat Dermot Desmond. We've talked about this. You're not going to unseat the Desmond family. But at the moment, I don't think that Michael Nicholson is fit for purpose, irrespective of how big a Celtic man he is or how well-intentioned he might be with that. I think if you have so many areas of the football club that don't function as they should, we're going to have quite a bit of discussion about certain things tonight, whether it's football or other. With yourself, Barry, which I'll let you take the lead on. We just don't function very well, and I think that it's a club that really desperately could do with modernising and some new ideas and some fresh perspective. And I know that we are real pie in the sky stuff because it's a boys' club, club, and you're never going to break that, and it's just going to be whatever Desmond wants. But if there was one thing I could do, I would just bring in someone fresh, try and freshen it up, some fresh perspectives, some new ideas, and I think that that's the best place to do it. And I know that a lot of people would maybe say pathways for the academy or sign some fucking players, but I think all of that gets easier if you maybe have a bit more forward thinking from the top down. And there's so much of what we're going to talk about tonight and the frustrations that I think all stems back to that point. So if I had one thing, that would be it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And Scott, as Stuart was talking there, you've got to think that the majority of our ills, some will argue, like Stuart says, that probably rests with Desmond and the board are probably doing his will, but there's so much incompetence that can be shared out. There's enough to go around, I think, and whether it's board members who are beyond retirement age, you've got to think what's in it for them rather than just a cosy number and the sort of boys club, bowling club mentality that is. but a lot of the ills could be fixed. You would imagine if there was fresh blood in there, fresh impetus, people who could help Celtic recognise the potential.
Yeah, and I could really relate to Stuart's answer because it's that sense of like we'd all like quite broad ranging sweeping change, but we fundamentally don't believe it's going to happen anytime soon. So you're almost trying to think of, okay, what's something realistic that could happen that would really change things on the ground, because we've all almost sort of lost hope in any kind of significant reform over the years. But yeah, when I thought about this question, I think for me, the main thing that springs to mind at the moment is just some sense of like transparency and insight into what's going on. I don't think we're going to be a fan-owned football club anytime soon, but like at Liverpool, for example, they've got a fan board which sort of runs parallel to the main club board. And not only do they get proper insight into what the club board is doing and why, they can try and influence it, and have done quite a few times in the recent past when it comes to things like price raises and stuff like that. So it's quite modest in the grand scheme of things, but I suppose I'd quite like to see fan representation on the board and just some level of insight, as I say, because the most frustrating thing at periods like this when nothing is happening and there's not even that many rumours flying around day after day, week after week, is no one really knows what's happening. You know, we're all talking about it. Even the most sort of ITK journalists out there in Glasgow, you know, Steve McGowan wrote the article earlier this week. He sort of hints at one or two things that might be going on, but he doesn't seem to be 100% in the picture either. So I'd love it if we just had a clearer idea of what's going on and why. I'm not sure. I don't think we would all suddenly go, "Oh, that's fine then," or we totally agree with the course that you're taking as a board. I don't think we would that would happen necessarily, but it would just be good to have that little bit more clarity and understanding of why nothing appears to be happening, and why if something does happen, it's all going to be very rushed and very panicked and very last minute.
Yeah, I think that if we did have some sort of outline, then, as you say, Scott, it wouldn't answer all our questions, but Stuart, it would maybe give us an indication. You think, all right, that makes more sense that we're maybe not splashing the cash in this area because it's been earmarked for stadium redevelopment or pathways, etc., or bringing in a sporting director. But when you hear nothing at all, as Scott says, you can't help but just feel like we're in the dark.
Yeah, we spend so much time trying to piece bits of information together and theorise what's been happening, who's the problem. We talked about it a bit last week. Where's the bottleneck? Why can't you get deals done? The McGowan article and then the sort of counter article from the Record that felt more kind of board influenced, I think did sort of start to point to where the issue has been. But it's just that not knowing, and obviously you can only really judge a window at the end of it. But I think that, see if Celtic get 4 really good players across the line, obviously say that's really good, but we can't just continue to keep doing this. It's not a way for a club of our size to function. And then it's also no good in terms of show and process to just wait until an AGM where you're largely not locked out, because obviously they do allow access, but it's very curated. It's not the sort
questions.
It's not the sort of level of access that Scott's referring to with like the Liverpool fan board, or you'll get it in. I always remember Lowell's comments about the record profits and when we hadn't really signed anyone, and how it wasn't a great use of funds and how we would try and improve that. And there's nothing really coming back. And even in the stuff that they've tried to do with the surveys and all that, you still never hear anything from it. Celtic are almost too big and too successful and too important to people to really be held accountable. And we talked about it a wee bit last week as well. There doesn't seem to be a huge appetite for change in terms of, I think that there's plenty to suggest that we need change at the top right now, irrespective of how this transfer window goes. And I think that the only time that you're going to see that is if you have a catastrophic league season like we did, the one that we shan't name. If, for example, we didn't navigate this Champions League tie, or if we fell behind in the league, perhaps that's when the gun gets pointed where it sort of rightly should be. People that have been resting on their laurels, not really being proactive with the how they want to progress the club and progress the footballing side of things. But I feel like we shouldn't really wait until it all goes to shit to do that, because you're wasting. We already have wasted countless opportunities over the years to really level up as a club, and as progression to the Champions League becomes harder and harder, and the financial routes kind of do get cut off to you, it's almost like the horse is bolted, and that will be the only option, is to wait until it goes to shit, and I don't really want to do that.
No, and just on that, the sort of board will get a question from, let me just see, it is from Russell, and he says, for the weekly, what are the club/board doing? They know that everyone knows how much money we have in the bank, and it's a lot, yet we spend next to nothing in comparison, and penny pinch when we can. Fans have no clue what's happening or what the plan is. We see snippets from ex-players saying that the manager and board seem to say and do different things. We're a laughing stock in the transfer market, and we've done little business to strengthen the squad following the departures of Kyogo and Kuhn, etc. We face a total banana skin tie against Kairat Almaty. We should win, but we're giving them every chance to believe. It beggars belief. We're just lucky. Rangers are awful for now. In comparison to clubs our size across Europe, I feel we're ran so amateur as well. So amateur, and fans are taken for the ride every other season when it comes to quality on the pitch. I think that's just a sort of a taster, Scott, of I don't want to generalise, but I would say a lot of fans are feeling that way now, even the ones who would traditionally back the club. I think this summer has been shambolic. As Stuart says, we probably will make signings, as we'll come on to talk about, but it just feels we're leaving it really late as well. And I'll come on to Roger's comments in a second, but he used the word we're notoriously late in doing business, and if that's not a message to the board, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's just like you touched on a minute ago with other clubs of our size. I was thinking of this earlier on today. Like, can you think of a single other club roughly our size who's trying to achieve the things we are this season, like winning our domestic league, making it through to the Champions League knockout phase? There's not a single one of them out there who is waiting until the very end of August to try and get all the major business done when you need at least 4 major signings. There's no one else doing it like that, and there's a reason for that. We talked about Newcastle before we came on. They've had a really frustrating summer, for example, but they've still signed some really quality players. And yeah, at this stage, it almost doesn't matter why it's happening, because it's clearly not a healthy business model either way. If you're choosing voluntarily to wait till the last couple of weeks of the window to do all your business, then why? Or if the alternative is that you genuinely have been trying to do business for all of these months and failing horribly, then that suggests a degree of just incompetence behind the scenes. So neither answer is a very reassuring one about the future of the club, really. But my own sort of theory, especially when you look at the Jacob Broom bids, I genuinely don't think we've been trying to sign players ever since Yamada. I just don't believe we have. I'm sure there are enough good people working inside the club at recruitment level or whatever who aren't on board with that. To me, it seems pretty clear that someone, presumably Desmond, has just put a complete block on it, and it's all going to get done last minute. And even if somehow we do nail it and sign lots of good players in those circumstances, then they're not going to be able to. Most of them aren't going to be able to play in the Champions League playoff round. They're not going to be able to play in the derby. Probably not going to be able to settle them in properly for another month, by which point the European group stage fixtures have already started. So it's just not any kind of healthy or rational way to be doing business in 2025. And as I'm sure we'll touch on as well, whatever players we sign now, maybe there will be a bit of star quality. Obviously, some big names are getting linked a little bit. Maybe it is a case of holding out for that calibre of name. But it's the idea that we've missed out on so many players in the meantime, like Lennon Miller and Chris Garden and the Norwegian winger who went this week as well. Like, there's no way that with some of those, in some cases, we might have said, you know what, maybe he's not right for us after all. But that there's too many of them for that to have been the case every time. In some cases, we clearly have just fucked it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Stuart, you're coming in.
yeah, it's either negligence or incompetence, as you say, and I think that to even put your manager in a position to try and navigate, as we say, potential banana skin tie without signing players by the deadline today. I know that they've got until 24 hours before the game on Wednesday, so Tuesday at
Yeah,
11
I
p.m. or
think
something.
it's 11 p.m. 11 p.m. Yeah.
That is it's just like a dereliction of duty, especially when the squad is screaming out for reinforcements at the top of the pitch. You can see it in the performance level. It's been talked about all summer. To not replace the likes of Kyogo and Kuhn, to not replace a Jota who you've known has had a long-term injury, these are just fundamental failings. And the club are burned year on year with late signings, whether it's the quality of player that you get or just paying over the odds. There is no way that Adamida is a £9 million player and that deal should have taken to the last last days of the window and that fee. Similarly, Arne Engels you could get for much less than that, and I don't think Austin Trusty is a £6 million player. But these are also circumstances of having left everything to the last minute, and I don't think it's the thing that worries me, and not to touch too much on that Daily Record article, all of these names that were linked in that article, my worry is that we are going to end up with a few of those players. Not because they're bad players. I think they might come in and do well. There's a lot of those players that I think are attractive. But those are players that you could have got weeks ago, and you could be flying out the traps in the league, and you could be really comfortable and really confident of going for Champions League football, and really happy to sort of put Rangers in the ground as early as possible and really try and push on in Europe, because it was like a hair's breadth away from something really special last year. And yeah, we might do that, but as Scott rightly says, you're looking into September, November time before you're going to have these players up to speed. And how many times have we seen it? Like the year that when Louis Palma came in and stuff like that, and those early Champions League games when we were at Feyenoord away, and you just didn't have the options, you didn't have the players to turn to because they weren't up to speed. They don't learn lessons. They're not. This isn't like we do it late in the window because we find that's the most effective way to get the best deals. We leave it late in the window and get worse deals. And I think that at that point, you need to change the way that the club is governed or ran, because it's only going to continue. And again, those articles are speculative, whether it's the McGowan one. His implication seemed to be that it was the money men, and it was that when you get to we have identified talent, we have identified players. Celtic are very good at identifying players. All these players that we have and don't want to lose currently are through our scouting, and I know that it can be better, of course it can. I know we waste a lot of money on a lot of shite, but generally speaking, we also do bring through a lot of talent, and that's why we've been as successful as we are. So they're identifying talent, they're identifying players that could come in and help the team right now, and it seems to be bottlenecking at a board level. And I could understand if we had money going out X, Y, and Z, or we weren't a cash-rich club. But when we are, why the fuck are we squabbling over hundreds of thousands of pounds for these deals for Brom in that case? And that's just the football inside of it. And then there's so much else on the club side that they're absolutely garbage at as well. And it's sort of just really demoralising.
That is indeed. And just before, a large part of our news section is going to be on transfers, but as a result of tomorrow night's game being on a Friday night, the press conference was today. And just some sort of highlights from what Rodgers was talking about. So he mentioned the trip to Kazakhstan to play Kairat Almaty, and he said, if we're honest, everyone would have preferred the closer team. It is what it is. We've been there before. It's such a huge game. When it comes, we'll be ready for it. So obviously Kairat won in penalties against Slovan Bratislava during the week, and we'll face them on Wednesday, 8 p.m, and then the away leg in Kazakhstan will be at 5:45 on the 26th. And Scott, a lot of the talk has been about the travel, but one thing that I thought was quite a key point is some people have been saying, if you think about it, Almaty had to make the journey they've been in the previous rounds, but they had to make the journey to Bratislava back home. They'll have to come to Celtic Park and go back home as well. So they're going to sort of feel the same sort of slog in terms of travel as we are. But if it was a purely footballing decision, and I know this is with a massive caveat, that they would have been one of the ones taking away the travel and the distance that you would have sort of handpicked.
Yeah, and I think it kind of shows you how just the unhappiness and the worrying about the transfer issue just sort of bleeds into everything eventually. Because when the draw was made, I think we would happily took either of them. And it's just the more that time's passed, especially when they won that first leg with a late penalty. I think that was when the idea first entered your mind of like, oh shit, Kazakhstan, like this could not be. And then I was keeping an eye on it the other night. It was 1-0 for a long time and then went to penalties. And then by that point, the idea's really solidified in your mind of like, like this is the worst possible place we could go to and all that. And as you say, maybe some of that is overblown. It is a team that we should be beating comfortably on paper, putting aside any concerns about the travel, the time distance, the pitch, etc. I think the big concern for me is, and a lot of people, is the second leg being away from home and the idea that we need to build up a big lead in the first leg, the way that we did against Astana a couple of years ago during Rodgers' first stint, because we're playing well enough at the moment to do a job on teams like this, like we did against Aberdeen at the weekend. I don't think we look anywhere near good enough in an attacking sense at the moment to go out and beat a team 3-4-0 to the extent where you'd be really quite comfortable heading into a second leg. I just cannot see that with the attacking options we've got at the moment.
Yeah, that is the worry, because Stuart Scott says that all being well, if it was a traditional Celtic attack, because that's something that we're sort of famed for, is we do tend to have, or have had over the years, good strikers, good attacking options, but the way that we've started the season and the options that we have, albeit there is until 11 o'clock tonight and 11 o'clock the day before the tie, but Rodgers, certainly this time round, doesn't tend to throw new signings in straight away, especially when they've not had a chance to train. So I think Scott's right to highlight that it might not be the case that we can build up a 3-4-0 lead. That, again, it could always sort of flip that we just hit clicks on the night, but it comes back to not being prepared with the business that we've done.
Completely. And I don't think that for all the discussion about Adam Ida, I'm not sure that you could legislate for him being so out of form. Like, he looks incredibly, like his head's like all over the place, head's gone, and so he is not a perfect fit for Celtic. So wreck the joint here. He's not a perfect fit for Celtic, but he's even less so when he's clearly struggling for confidence and playing poorly. And the only alternative is a bit of an unknown quantity in Shin Yamada. You've lost so many goals from Nicholas Kuhn. You're really relying on James Forrest, who's far more functional than Yang, but doesn't really necessarily provide goals and assists at the same sort of clip as he would have had. There's a lot of rumour and conjecture about Daisen Maeda's future. Where's his head? You've got this sort of unnatural fit with him and Tierney at the moment that's kind of grabbing a few headlines. And I do think that the fans will worry a lot more about this game than the players would. I think that they won't approach it like, oh, we need to rack up 4 or 5 goals, we need to keep going and have it affect them. But whether you outplay them or not, you might have a game like Bratislava where you just roll over the top of them, you score 5 goals, or you might have a game like Young Boys where you completely dominate them, but you have 3 disallowed goals and you miss a penalty and things just conspire against you. And I'm kind of anticipating it being a horrible 2 legs just because we do have a way of doing that, unfortunately. But given, I must, like, no disrespect to them, I literally have never heard of Almaty prior to this game, didn't know they existed, and so obviously given the chance, that's probably who you would have picked out if you put the travel to one side. When they come to Celtic Park, with the time difference and the travel, they're basically kicking off at midnight, whereas we kind of have a bit more generous sort of leeway going east. You would just hope that they can get it done. And also the fact that now we're hopefully a bit more of a functional European team where we can go and play sort of, it's maybe not the most easy on the eye, but just be really solid. Don't look like conceding. Don't look like losing the heads completely and shipping like 3 or 4 goals, is like speaking of the Astana game. And just get it over the line and see where we get to with the signings. But it's just sheer negligence to not have given the manager options. And even if you get someone in before now, they're not going to start the game. They'll probably feature off the bench if you're desperate or if you've got the luxury of doing so. But so much work should have been done that Celtic don't need to go and sign players after we qualify, or it's cherry on top stuff.
Yep.
Not we're at the bare bones, which is kind of where we feel like we are.
Yeah, definitely. Just some other things that Rodgers mentioned today. Again, said asked whether the squad will be strengthened prior to the game. He said, hopefully would be the answer to that. We have right up until the day before the game to change our squad. Hopefully that can be the case. I don't want to dwell too much on it. It's been constant. Fucking too right, Brendan. We hope we can improve it, and hopefully by then we will do. When asked if there was if the lack of transfer business is starting to cause frustration, he said, I'm philosophical about it. The club has always notoriously done business towards the end of the window. All managers and coaches want players in as soon as we can. You want to be as prepared as you possibly can. What's gone unnoticed is we've made a really good start. 2 really good wins, played well, and I know we'll get better. I can't knock the performances over the 2 games to get the results. Sometimes that's been clouded by the negativity about the transfers. And Scott, you mentioned it earlier that the negativity around the transfers, as Roger calls it, is bleeding into every aspect now. And that's something that the manager's sick of, the fans will be sick of it as well. I dare say the players are probably sick of it. And one thing I have liked that Rodgers has done, he's tried to protect the group by saying he can't give them enough praise. He said they've done really well, working really hard, they will get better and stuff. And it's quite good that he's doing that, because it feels like the fans and the manager and the players to an extent are pulling in one direction, and the board is always pulling in the opposite one.
Yeah, it's probably quite clever from him. I did feel as if I was being gaslit a little bit when he talked about how good the St Mirren performance was, because come on, but Aberdeen away it was a bit more justifiable, and yeah, I have found myself being quite frustrated with a lot of stuff Rodgers has said recently. Not sure I even found it convincing when he's talked about his decision to remove his tie today at Pittodrie. But
that was funny, yeah.
But in that regard, yeah, I think when there is so much negativity going around, I think it does make a lot of sense. You know, it's not the players' fault that the squad's so skin deep at the moment. It's not their fault that we've got some guys in the pit who clearly shouldn't be first choice, and I think it makes sense to sort of funnel as much positivity into that as he can. But I was going to mention one thing that really struck me just about the overall mood. The tickets went on sale this afternoon. The general sale happened this afternoon for Kairat, the first leg. And I looked at it. I decided not to go in the end because I've been up to Glasgow 2 of the last 3 weekends, and I've just got too much going on down here. But there was, like, having bought tickets for European games loads of times in those general sales over the years. Obviously, it's only a qualifier. It's not a group stage game. It's not like a sort of glitzy opponent, but it really struck me just the amount of tickets that were available in every single area of that ground, even after, you know, the season ticket holders have took their allocation. So I think that's another indication, if it were needed, of just where people's heads are at the moment.
Yeah, spot on. And just that'll lead us nicely to what Stuart alluded to earlier. Myself, along with quite a few others, have had issues with the ticket office this week, where last week the money was due to come out for the Falkirk game. It never did come out. Contacted Celtic. It was very much the case that we'll wait and see. The request has been sent. My direct debit's been in place for years, don't even think about it. Never happened. Had to phone Celtic up, pay over the phone to buy my ticket, to get my season ticket activated for tomorrow night. And they assured me that everything would be fine and my money would come out today for the Kairat game. Again, it hasn't. And then phoned my bank, who told me that Celtic have cancelled my direct debit and Celtic are refusing to acknowledge this. So I've had to, just through kind of people on the huddle board have had the same issue, and I know that Galpet on Twitter and people have had that. So I've had to resubmit a direct debit mandate when I didn't touch it at all, and it's just gone round the houses, and must have sent about 20 emails back and forward. Poor girl in the ticket office who's had to deal with my queries because I know it's not her fault, but it's just another example of treating the customers like shit, really. Well, there's been no explanation given for why my direct debit was cancelled and why other people's has been, and I dare say that there might be people who aren't tech savvy, maybe don't check their emails or maybe don't check their online banking, and it might turn up for the game tomorrow night and not be permitted access because their ticket hasn't been activated. So again, a bit of a personal gripe for me, but I know that it's affecting other people as well, so I thought we should mention it. But yeah, just not great. Other than that, Rodgers mentioned Tierney today. He said his mentality is unbelievable. I'm pleased with how he's come in and settled. He's working his fitness up. He's so committed. He's so full on. You can see his maturity now. He's inherently a guy who gives everything. We want to try and increase his level of strength. There are parts of that we feel we can help with his robustness. And then, Stuart, you mentioned the sort of teething problems between him and Dyson. Rodgers was asked about Dyson's contract situation. He said he's a couple of years left. There's been discussions going on in the background. I don't have any updates on it. I don't know of any other developments. And then this bit isn't great. When he was asked how confident he was that the Japanese striker would be at the club come the end of the window, yeah, fairly confident of that, as can be. Oh,
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
I read the quote and I thought, oh, that's good. And then I watched the video and I was like, that's not as good. That's not as good as I'd hoped it would be. That is a worry. I'm sort of gearing myself up for that. The fact, I know we talked a bit about Carter Vickers, how he suspected that he might be the one to go, and obviously there could still be that sucker punch, but from the clearly briefed Daily Record article and kind of marrying that with what Rodgers had said, does sound like maybe they're done at centre half and that they're not looking to bring anyone else in. On that article you had, was it Obert? Was that the left back? He was mentioned again, and then you've seen another link surface tonight for Tyrell Malacia again, which I think that'd be a dreadful bit of business to cover your injury-prone left back with an even more injury-prone left back would not be great. Not be great business. But the rumours and the about Maeda haven't really gone away. Sorry if that's news for anyone. And I do worry that that's the sting in the tail, and that depending on how many incomings we see, it might be that, you know, that's the price that you pay going the other way. And I think it will be after the qualifiers. But we always talk about how it takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks for a deal to actually get done at Celtic. But if you think about the Kyogo and Jota deal, that was more or less 24 hours because it had all seemingly been dotted I's and crossed T's before that young boys game. And I do worry that it'll be something like that, where just one morning Daz and Maeda will be gone and you'll be presented with Balakisha or someone like that and just have to hope that he hits the ground running and fits in. And one of the problems with losing a player of Maeda's quality, not only is he just quite integral to how we play, obviously one of our best players, had an incredible season, fans' favourite as well, is you're just not giving players a fair crack at integrating into the team if they're going to have to come in and suddenly be the main man, and you don't have the depth where Forrest and Yang can sort of survive. You would probably be in a position with Maeda's contract where you could just dig your heels in and say he's not going. Unfortunately, we can't actually sanction that just now, and maybe cut a deal with him that he can go in January or he can go in the summer. But it ultimately comes down to players and agents, and I don't think Celtic are very good at digging their heels in. When we look at how other clubs have dug their heels in with us,
unless it's Marco Tilio.
I know, there you go. Well, come on down, try and replace Dyson. The way that Go Ahead Eagles were basically like, no, obviously we're not going to do that deal. That's mental. We just seem to go, yeah, right, it's good money, we'll take it now, without a sort of care for the football and consequence. So I do worry that's coming down the pipe, but we shall wait and see.
Just before I get your thoughts on Dyson's sort of future, Scott, do you think, I know it's maybe just, I know Rodgers mentioned today that he's not fully up to speed, but I kind of, and again, this is just my sort of observation, but I kind of got the feeling that he's almost playing like he doesn't want to be here, or maybe not playing to the level that he was. And I know that the level he was at last year isn't the norm for Dyson. I know he always gives 100% and he's chasing down and all the other aspects of his game. But for me, in both the St Mirren and Aberdeen games, he's kind of looked like a shadow of himself.
Yeah, and it has been interesting sort of a debate about his performances in the first two games, and I think it absolutely is a valid tactical point that people are raising about how we've almost forgotten on the left-hand side how to play with a conventional overlapping fullback. So there maybe is a bit of them both trying to do the same thing at times. But I do think he's not been quite at it, and I think he's such a sort of diligent character that it's by no means a case of him just not being asked. But I do get the impression, I mean, it's difficult when the whole team is playing in a quite uninspired fashion for you to be the sort of standard bearer, but that's what he was for us throughout all of last season from the beginning to the end. So I do feel as if his head has been turned a little. But I think Lorenzo put it quite well on the agenda on Monday. I just don't think there's any amount of money we could get offered for him at the moment. Realistically, 25 or 30, that would be worth losing him. He's just such a leader for us. Maybe not vocally, but in terms of setting the standards, with his energy, his work rate, he's quite often our biggest goal threat. He's one of the few that can be relied upon to deliver consistently in Europe against Rangers and all the big games. At his best, he's more or less playing two positions at any one time or three. He's our best winger, he's our best striker. I mean, I could go on. The more I talk about it, the more depressed I am about him being unveiled by some absolutely run-of-the-mill Premier League club on deadline day. But yeah, I think Stuart says we're not good at digging in our heels, but maybe this is a case, regardless of what happens in terms of incomings, where we do actually need to do it for once.
Yeah, definitely. Sure.
I get the impression that if it did come to the crunch, I don't think he would agitate. I think he would probably be just accepting of that. If I don't know what his sort of agent situation is, but he's obviously he's in a good situation, you know, if they wanted to extend his contract or make him, you know, make it sweet financially for him for the next 6 months, year, whatever it is, and offer some guarantees. You did sort of hear that Kyogo wanted away before he got his move, and they must have had similar discussions that wasn't really on the table, because it would obviously take them 18 months to find a replacement, TBD. So I would hope that if I think it's more of a tactical thing at the moment, and I also think it sounds harsh, but even towards the end of last season, there was a sort of reverting to type from Daisen Maeda, in that the goal scoring that we saw was just unparalleled from any numbers he's put up, or even like the sort of clinical finishing, and he was just in a real rich vein of form and real confidence, which lasted a long time, like pretty much the majority of that season.
Kind of January to April, really.
Yeah, and then, you know, I just think of big chances in that last Rangers game and the cup final, and just some of the stuff you saw, like running
even
through.
Pataudry, wasn't it, where he took that really good touch and then slipped?
Just at the weekend there, yeah. I think that's all stuff that's kind of been part of the deal, where you get this player that you can't replace what he does in the team with his work rate. And as you say, Scott, he's a standard bearer for just like non-stop work ethic, tracking back, everything he does going forwards. Sometimes he does have it in his locker to just be like absurd as well with his crossing and passing and finishing. It's always been a part of his game. Kind of looked like he'd maybe moved past that, and I think you've maybe just seen it creep back in. Is that because he's been moved back out onto the left after he was quite comfortable through the middle? Very possibly. But I think that you can start to replace Maeda in the aggregate in terms of goals and assists that he contributes to the team, but certainly not in the last week of a window. And also all of the intangibles that you mentioned, you can't really replace. It's going to take a long time to do that, especially if you're waiting on a player like Jota who could carry a bit of that mantle, even if it's just a little bit of magic or something to kind of keep the fans happy. We just don't really have that. And it just feels like if you get deals over the line, this could be something that still sours the window. And I'd much rather, if we're going to lose our best players, that it's like a Nicholas Kuhn situation where it's just resolved very quickly. And then even though we're crying out for a Nicholas Kuhn right now, you kind of forget about them and you move on. And I think it has the potential to really derail things, depending on how the last couple of days of that window play out.
Yeah, definitely. Just conscious of time, so we'll just have a kind of quick fire roundup of the links. So one that was very sort of tenuously linked was Jamie Vardy today. Quick one on that, Scott?
Nah. To be fair, I when I thought about it earlier today, I got the exact same vibe that I did when Joe Hart got linked with us. Because you've seen his whole career from a distance, and he just seems like a kind of cringy, not particularly likeable character, albeit one with who's had a lot of success in his career. And to be fair, I was proved wrong by Joe Hart. Maybe in the fullness of time, I would be proved wrong by 38-year-old Jamie Vardy, but no, there's lots of different things that put me off it, and I just don't think you can justify at that age and this stage of his career the massive wage you would probably want.
Yeah,
and I know another team in the city that are looking for a striker as well.
Oh, he's
perfect for them.
Perfect fit.
Next one, Stu, the Sondre Oljaceta. player who I believe we went in heavily for, along with Garden. Again, like Scott said earlier in the pod, we chase these players so much, and then when they're offered to other teams for lesser value, we're not interested anymore. And he's joined FC20 this year for 4.5 million. This week, sorry, for 4.5 million, I believe.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm pretty sure that we were linked for, more money than that, and still
7, I think.
we were like willing to go to that. So that kind of makes you wonder. It's just another thing that kicks up more questions than answers. Is it a money thing? Is it an ego thing? Are they not willing to go back in now? Because all of the players linked in that article, Balakwisha was there, Brown was there, the Romanian striker was there, and the telling part I thought was that it said that Brendan Rodgers finally to get his transfer wish. And that sounds like they've been at loggerheads and they've basically said, right, we'll go back and get them. We'll go back and do these deals that we have, for whatever reason, been pussyfooting around, pussy-footing around, and just we'll get them done. So they've always had the capacity to get them done. That Orchester, whatever his name is, deal could have been done, but it hasn't been, so why not? And what are we going to get left with?
Have you ever got this, maybe a bit of a rogue theory, but have you ever got the impression this summer that maybe Rodgers just looked at all these guys or Yester and that, and has basically just said, "Fuck all that hipster shit. Let's make my kind of signings." And it's the slightly more unrealistic links like Ben Doak and Raheem Sterling and all of these guys, and that's why we're being so stingy with the money, because we're trying to get all of these unrealistic targets, and at the end of the window we'll either get them and spend silly amounts on their wages and so on, or we won't. And I don't know, that would explain 2 or 3 different parts of this to me.
It's a bit like a whodunit, isn't it? Whether it's Rodgers in the dugout with the, I don't know, clipboard, or whether it was someone in the boardroom or whatever. The Grealish thing this week probably speaks to that theory, where you get linked as part of an article about Jack Grealish's summer, and you were interested. How interested were they? Are the board interested because they want to be seen to be interested, even though they know realistically that's not a deal they'll be able to do? Or is Brendan Rodgers saying, fuck off, I don't want this wee Norwegian guy, go and get Jack Grealish? That's the sort of level that we should be aspiring to. Who knows?
Yeah, I think there's probably blame.
I think there's something in it, yeah.
For everybody,
If I can find a way to blame Rodgers, I certainly will.
You sound like the board members. Other one, it looks like Ambrosino, the Italian under-21 striker from Napoli, is going to stay with them. Obviously, Lennon Miller joined Udinese this week for 4.5 million. We've got a couple of questions from listeners on that. So, Scott, I'll come to you for this one. So, Daniel says, do you think the David Turnbull transfer had any sway on the board for not pushing the ball out on Lennon Miller? Turnbull was thought of very highly and had won Young Player of the Year, and paying 3.5 million to a Scottish club was a big deal at that point. Turnbull did as a turn at times, but overall it didn't work out as well as everybody probably expected or hoped. As much as that shouldn't make a difference 5 years later, it wouldn't surprise me with the board if that did affect us going for him. On that note, do you think Miller is being slightly overrated, as you could argue that Turnbull had just come off a better season back then than Miller has now? I think they're different players, aren't they? But
But possibly, I wouldn't be surprised if Celtic Board did have the brain of an elephant, sort of elephant memory when it comes to spending large amounts of money and like really grudging it when it doesn't actually deliver value. And Turnbull certainly was, a qualified success at best over the years. And I suppose you could make the comparison. They're quite different players, as you say. Turnbull played in a much more advanced role, but the main concern with Turnbull always was he didn't quite have the legs to play the kind of football we wanted to, particularly under Ange. Was he quick enough? And I know that's been a concern with people who have watched a lot of Lennon Miller. Was he quick enough? But I think a few people a lot of people have made all week, which has resonated with me, is why not at least be in the conversation for Lennon Miller? Why not at least give Lennon Miller a decision to make? I just find that so strange that it was Udinese who are nowhere near the force they used to be when it comes to scouting and developing players. And Ipswich have obviously just been relegated to the Championship. The fact that we weren't even in the conversation is just very strange, especially after, again, reportedly being very interested in January. So why are we on a completely different page in each transfer window compared to the last one? It's just another part of this unfolding mystery.
Stuart, just before I bring you in, there's just one more question about Lennon Miller as well. So Andy says, I'm going to try not to say too much of Lennon Miller, as I think we're on the same wavelength here, and the notion of signing the best young talent was covered well on the agenda. But is it just me, or do the Scottish media and non-Celtic or Rangers fans fetishise abroad as the ideal destination for any young Scottish prospect because they're desperate for a neutral national team icon? I don't think it's unfair to at least make the case that Celtic is objectively a better move for any player than a team in the bottom half of Serie A. And I'm not convinced by the claims that Miller only wanted to go abroad. I'm concerned that Celtic didn't even give him a decision to make. I reckon we'll regret this even more than John McGinn.
Yeah, I think that's, well, I sort of agree and disagree with that, where I do, I mean, he's obviously very strongly advised by his dad, and his dad does a lot of it's almost like a sort of Tiger Woods situation where he's just never without his old man when he's talking about this, that, and the other. But I do think that the perception has been on the player's side, and this is just based on vibes and reading the tea leaves. I agree that signing for Celtic's better than going and playing in the lower end of Serie A, but also there's now quite a very worn path of Scottish players going over and really succeeding, and it could be a great place for him to develop away from the spotlight a little bit. And I think that with the age he's at and the situation of signing for Celtic or Rangers, if they had aspirations to do that, I think it just brings so much baggage that I just always got the impression that they just didn't want to touch. And I think that Celtic could compete financially. We certainly wouldn't have signed him for £4.5 million. You probably would be talking 6, 7, 8. And it's great. It would be amazing for Celtic to have Lennon Miller, but I guess where does Lennon Miller fit in at the moment, and can you satisfy his ambition to be playing regularly and developing? I would argue probably not. And that's maybe not a popular thing, because obviously, as I say, I think he's a great player and I think he would be a great addition. But the way we are just now, if you're keeping Hatate, if you're bringing in Negrin, if you're trying to accommodate Engels and McGregor, and then you still have the issue of McCowan, who has contributed really well so far this season, irrespective of what you thought of him last year or his price point or any of that. And the same with Bernardo, who's become a bit of a talking point. Yep. You have just lots of bodies, and I just think that it's probably just looked like a non-starter. And that's before you factor in how incompetent Celtic are with doing these kind of deals. So I can understand people maligning the fact that we've not been in the mix, that we've not signed him. I just think it was a non-starter, and it's going to be one of these things where if Lennon Miller goes on and has an amazing career, people will see it as this what-if moment. But I honestly don't think it's ever been close. I think they've probably shut it down quite early.
Yeah, I think so as well. And yeah, I think you're right. It probably will be every time he does something well and there's a clip of him on Twitter or X, whatever, will always be like, oh, the one that got away, when maybe in hindsight or sort of being realistic, it never was close, as you say. We'll turn our attention now to tomorrow night's game, League Cup against Falkirk, 7:45 kick-off at Celtic Park. And Scott, there's something quite nice about, if the weather is as good as it's been this week, tomorrow night it'll be quite nice to a few pints before the game and watch Celtic at home on a Friday night. The only other time I can remember recently that happening was, I think we beat Dundee 6-0, maybe, I think it was maybe under Ronnie. And the only reason I remember that being a Friday night is because I remember there was a big thing in the press about a couple had booked their wedding for about 2 years, and it was that Friday, and it had to get rescheduled because the league had scheduled a league game at Celtic Park on a Friday night. But hopefully that isn't the case for any would-be newlyweds tomorrow night. But I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I think it's funny how the positioning of a fixture can change your outlook on it when it is something that's not the norm. And I'd much prefer a Friday night than a 12:30 on a Sunday or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. For some reason, it does just give it a whole different dynamic, and it probably, you'll get a lot more people in the pubs coming into the game in a jolly mood, shall we say, that you just wouldn't have got if it was midday on Saturday or late afternoon on Sunday or whatever. I know that when you go to European games at this time of year and you get into the ground and you can feel the atmosphere building, but the sun's still sort of shining down on the ground, it is always just a really special feeling, and I suppose it will be the same on Friday night. But yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game just in terms of the lineup, and how much risk we take, how much risks Rodgers feels we can afford to take, bearing in mind how close they ran us um, in the League Cup this time last year.
Yeah, definitely. And it is, Stuart, it's the sort of conundrum where you want to see something a wee bit different, like the likes of Simpson Pusey, maybe Shin from the start. Will we finally use this season where we let Sinisalo have the cup games, etc.? But also caveated with the fact that you only have to go back 2 years when we played Kilmarnock in Rodgers' first cup game as Celtic manager for the second time when we went out. Um, Again, I'm tending to think that, again, if it was a fully functioning football club, I would sacrifice the League Cup for European progression. But with all the issues that we've mentioned already tonight, that doesn't really feel like a thing right now. But will you be tempted to make a few changes? And if you need to rescue it by making substitutes, you can.
I would, but I don't think he will. I think the noises that he was making today sort of imply that it'll be quite close to a full strength team, although that is,
A weakened
for
team.
for debate at the moment. I think that he has some opportunities and opportunities that he should take. I think the opportunity to take Adam Ida out the firing line a little bit and also to see if Shin Yamada is a legitimate option for Wednesday night is really important. And I think it would give everyone a bit of a lift just to see something a bit different. Same with Simpson Pusey, just to see, is he going to be the left-sided centre half or is he there to deputise Carter Vickers? I'd also suggest that going into the biggest game of your season, you probably want to protect injury-prone players like Tierney and Carter Vickers, but he's kind of in a bit of a jam at the moment with this sort of power play about playing Liam Scales at left back. It's quite a different. The optics are very different of starting Liam Scales at left back, and then similarly, if you start in Amura at left back, you run the risk that he'll play well and quite undermine the point that he's clearly trying to make. So I think there'll be some changes, but I don't think there'll be wholesale changes. I would like to see Sinisalo get a shot for the League Cup. I think he's more than proven he'd be capable of that. But I suspect he's not going to change the team as much as we would like.
Just on your point about Scales, we get another question from Rob, and he said, under Rodgers, players who don't break into the first team straight away tend not to ever come through or get a chance. So is that the last that we've seen of Inamura? The thought of Scales playing the last 30 minutes of every game at left back is terrifying, as you say, Stu. Far more terrifying than his starting games at left back. And then Scotty goes on to say, Rob goes on to say, also thoughts, your thoughts, the thoughts on subs were interesting. No shows for Yang and new signing Kenny. New deal for Kenny. Both out the door and no place on the bench at all for Murray, which is disappointing. Keep up the good work. Do you think there's any chance of seeing the likes of Kenny, Inamura, or Yang tomorrow night?
Uh, Possibly, but yeah, he doesn't tend to rotate as much as you expect him to in the early rounds of the cups generally. And as Stu touches on it, like, especially when he is trying to make political points, which I think sometimes he is guilty of, I don't know if he'll see it as worthwhile to roll back on that just for the sake of one early League Cup tie, when we've got quite a few days to spare before the Kairat game. But the one that I would really like to see, I think we have to see Yamada. I don't even think it's a luxury. I think we have to give ourselves the chance of having an alternative to Adamida in there at the moment. Like it really, not to quote the Mick McCarthy meme, but it can't go on like this. With him starting every game, it really can.
It can.
But yeah, in Rogers' accent, it can.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see Bernardo as well, just because he seems
Yeah.
to be visible at the moment, and I really don't know where his Celtic career is at. Really, Engels is obviously, a lot of guys in midfield are having to work hard to prove themselves at the moment because there's more competition in that part of the pitch. Engels has got a lot to prove, having lost his place to Nygren, but Bernardo, we're just not. He's just been completely invisible so far. So I'd really like, whether it's deputising for Calmac or elsewhere in midfield, I really would like to just see where he's at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a strange one because as we say, we've got kind of 6 options for there, but he's the one that doesn't seem to really feature at all right now, Stuart.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think another area of interest is Yang. You mentioned that he didn't come on at all. Obviously, I'm not in the Yang gang, but I feel like with so few options out wide, Rodgers probably does have to keep him ticking over because he might be required over the 2 legs in the Champions League. It was also interesting that was the first time at the weekend you saw Nygren used out wide, even if it was as a result of, shuffling the pack. And does that free up Engels to have a bit of a berth in the midfield, or is it just how we're going to finish games, and does he not want to play Nygren out wide or not, again, overcompensate for that? But there's a couple of areas of the pitch that I think will be interesting, but we think they're interesting, and then it's going to be the same team until they sign players.
Yeah, and just on that, Scott, do you think, I was a wee bit surprised on Flag Day that there was, maybe it wasn't the right place for it. I know that historically there has been sort of protest on Flag Day, and people have thought it wasn't the right time or the place to do it when you're sort of celebrating the previous achievements of the team. I always think back to Flag Day after we stopped at 10 and Fergus getting booed for the sort of the chaos that was the sort of transfer and the manager appointment at that time. But do you think we might see any discontent tomorrow night regarding the lack of transfer activity?
Possibly, but it's always an interesting one in terms of politically, I think we're quite often surprised in this country when elections happen because we all do live in our little echo chambers on social media and we don't really realise what the prevailing mood is out there in sort of wider society. And I almost wonder that with football sometimes because I don't want to use the dreaded phrase happy clappers, but particularly us appearing on a podcast called The Cynic, we are naturally at the more cynical end of the spectrum, and most of my other Celtic supporting mates in group chats feel the same or are even more sort of irate about what's going on at the moment. But there is a lot of other people, you need to work a bit harder to find them, but there is people saying, oh look, we've signed 7 players already, and look what we did in Europe last season, or giving it the argument about not being able to trust Rodgers because of the money spent last summer. So to me, there doesn't seem to be. You would maybe get something from the Green Brigade, but there doesn't seem to be that sort of wide that uniformity of opinion across the whole fan base to maybe see a really sort of major protest at the ground.
Yeah, Stuart, just your thoughts briefly.
I would like to see it, but again, I don't think that there will be. I think that obviously you've got the home cup ticket scheme where people will want to buy in to sort of pay their way in, and I just wonder what the uptick will be on tickets as well, whether you'll have people that sit it out, kind of similar to what you said, Scott, about folk maybe just voting with their feet a wee bit with how things are. The fact that the most communication that we get from the club these days is punting tickets or different tops or training gear, I think people are just wearing a bit thin with until they start to see something coming back the way. So I don't know that will be the time and place for it to happen. Also, because you do still have a couple of weeks of the window left, it's difficult. But like I was kind of talking about at the start, irrespective of what happens now, the position that they've put them in is not good enough, and that does merit discomfort and chanting and all the above and protest. But I don't know if there's the appetite for it.
Yeah, we'll wait and see, and certainly looking forward to the football on the pitch anyway tomorrow night and something different. Just quickly before we finish with the quiz, on this day in 1992, Celtic make 3 signings in one day as Liam Brady unveiled new boys Rudy Bata, Andy Payton and 1.5 million man Stuart Slater. It's quite interesting that we're still tending to shop in that bracket.
One this day is really trolling us today, isn't it? 3 signings in one day.
Yeah, that's unheard of. Us back to I was going to say the good old days, but those were the bad old days at that time. Yeah, and then also on this day, in 2002, Celtic beat Basel. Sorry. I always say Basel, but I know that Paul Carlin corrected Cal recently and said it's Basel. It looks like it should say Basel, but I'm not Swiss.
I'm not taking Paul's word for that. You can't just be the arbitrator of everything.
That's true. Beat them 3-1 the game that Mo Silla scored that sort of lovely volley at the edge of the box, and then we would transpire to lose 2-0 away, go out and away goals, but it didn't end too badly as we started the UEFA Cup run to Seville, and that's maybe a slightly happier memory at those times.
Yeah, it does still feel though like I remember vividly that feeling like a big upset at the time and that you've been kind of done by, it conjures more images of like getting done by a European minnow than anything, which is, I know you're trying to spin it as a happy memory, but it makes me a bit antsy when we go into potential banana skin ties.
See, just a fun fact on that, or an interesting fact, and I know that it's maybe something that Guy will pick up on a pod tomorrow, that Benji Siegrist has had comments about the bizarre way that Celtic dealt with his transfer out, kind of blocked his way a couple of times, but I remember that he said when he signed that when we lost that game 2-0 away, Rab Douglas was in goals and he was the ball boy behind the goal for Basel. I thought that was quite a nice...
For Basel? Well, there you go.
Yeah, that's probably the most he was involved in a Celtic game. He played for the club for 3 years or whatever.
A right good teammate, though.
Yes. Right, we'll finish off with a lineup quiz. We will go back to January the 29th, 2012, and it was a League Cup semi-final against the weekend's opponents, Falkirk. So if you're new to this game, both Scott and Stuart have 2 lives to name players from the starting lineup and also substitutes, even if they were not used. So Scott, I'll start with you.
January 2012.
Yes.
Commons.
Chris Commons. Yes.
Forest.
Yes.
Hooper.
Hooper, yes.
Beaton.
No.
He's always cutting about.
Brown.
Brown, yes, he scored.
I really don't remember this game.
Stokes.
Yes, he also scored twice. In the 3-1 victory.
Foster.
Foster, yep.
Samaras.
Samaras on the bench, yes.
And off the red.
McGrew.
Mulgrew, yes. Well done, doing well here.
Matthews.
Matthews, yes. Oh,
Izakiri.
yes.
Oh, it's getting dicey now.
Virgil? Too early?
Too early. Yep.
Too early.
So, unfortunately for Stu, he's run out of his 2 lives. So I'll just run through the team. So it was Foster in goals.
Hi,
Chaduri to start with.
Jeez, oh.
Thomas Ronya and Mulgrew at centre half. Izagiri was left back. Midfield was Brown, Wanyama, Ledley, Forrest.
Brown was the right winger, remember that?
That's right. Yep. And then we had Hooper and Stokes as your strikers. Substitutes who did come on were Adam Matthews and Ki Sung Young and Chris Commons. And the unused substitutes were Lucas Saluska and Georgios Samaras. So not a memorable game by any stretch. The only one thing I could remember about that game was that Scott Brown scored a penalty because he had a really good record in penalties at that time. And then obviously it wasn't to be a fruitful few months after that because obviously we would go on to lose the final to Killie, which was a horrendous day, I remember.
Oh God, yeah.
But no, hopefully, as we've sort of mentioned tonight, the rumours are starting to pick up. We alluded to the fact that Balakisha is mentioned again. There's sort of the ITK, if you can even get any of them, as you said, Scott, are saying that there's a fee being agreed for Balakisha. Stuart mentioned Malacia has been linked as well, and there was also a winger, a Mali international called Umar Traore. So hopefully the wheels are in motion. It probably will be too early for tonight's deadline, but as we say, we can add 2 players up until Tuesday, 11 o'clock. But I think we'll leave it there. Scott, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
And Stu, thank you.
Thanks. I was just quickly going to say that I really look forward to watching Balakisha's open goal interview in 10 years' time where we find out why the fuck it's taken 8 weeks to do this deal that was apparently on the table before pre-season. But we'll have to wait for that one. And hopefully Andy Halliday will have a tactics breakdown on that as well.
Yes, that was quite something watching that last night.
Anyway, thank you for having me, Barry. That's all I wanted to say.
No problem at all. So all eyes to a big week for Celtic, starting the League Cup defence tomorrow night, and then obviously the qualifier kicks off on Wednesday. But this has been the Cynic Weekly. I've been your host, Barry Gallagher, with Scott Fleming and Stuart Duggan, and we'll speak to you down the road.